Let's talk about 20 hidden messages in Succession Season 1. They're all based on visual and verbal cues, such as war, Star Wars, Napoleon, empires, theater, fairy tales, shoes, Willy Wonka, Oedipus and Hamlet, games, prostitution, time, dinosaurs, dogs, elevators, eggs, boats, water, tables, and the Carnival. I watched and took notes on every episode of Succession Season 1. It took me 50 hours and 14 full pages of notes to do so. Every single motif in this video showed up over and over again throughout Season 1, and I'll prove it. Without further ado, let's get to the video. War. Without a doubt, the most potent motif in Succession's first season is war. Logan, surprise, is the character who's most obsessed with it. In Logan's office, directly behind his desk, lies a Spartan helmet. At Thanksgiving, he shows Willa various war medals and mentions to her that the Assyrians wore medals before the Romans.
The Assyrians wore medals before the Romans.
Rome. That's another big motif we'll get to in this video later. And in episode 9, we glimpse a couple spears and various weapons in Logan's office as he contemplates going to Shiv's wedding. Other visual references to war include the sword behind the therapist chair in episode 7 and the knight armor in Caroline's home. Then we have a few references to stabbing, whether that's Shiv's literal name representing a makeshift knife inmates fashion in prison.
I'm Shiv fucking Roy.
Or whether it's a few spoken references we hear here and there.
I'm in a fucking knife fight here. I'm holding a dildo made out of American cheese.
You okay?
Yeah, I think I just got stabbed by your mom, but I'm not completely sure.
The real weapon of choice in Succession Season 1, though, are guns.
The rebels are getting shot in the town square.
You know, I have a sneaky feeling that if we won the election, he'd probably like to line me up and everyone I know and shoot us, you know.
I need to spike your father's guns.
Only 15% of men, when it comes to it, actually shoot an undefended enemy soldier.
He shot first.
The name of episode 6 is Which Side Are You On? And what's even more fascinating are the visual references to sides we see throughout that episode. It's basically one long succession of people going to dinner, whether it's Greg and Ewan, Greg and Tom, Roman and Lawrence, or Jerry, Roman, Kendall, and Frank. They all sit opposite one another on opposing sides, thus driving this theme home even further.
I'm on the side of change.
Yeah, you are.
And if you remember, a terror threat is the reason Kendall can't get in his helicopter and make it to the board meeting on time. Then we have a slew of verbal references to war, rebellions, traitors, and massacres.
It's not a fucking teddy bear's picnic, Roman. It's a massacre.
What's happening? The troops are taking Saddam's palace, man.
What about it, son? You want to jump out the trenches and play a game of soccer?
He'll never retreat. It'll be hostile, hostile, hostile.
The cherry on the cake here is one of my favorite scenes of Season 1, when we see Logan ascend from Connor's pool, showing off an array of scars on his back. His life has been a war, it seems. War. Is it really that difficult to analyze why it's a major theme here? There's a constant war for power of Waystar Royco seen in Season 1. The main factions are, let me check my notes, everybody, and this theme points to that idea. Another possible meaning here is the fact that Logan's media empire, and most others, aim to divide people. They aim to put people on opposite sides and stoke the fires of dissent, creating a sort of Cold War between the left and right. Logan isn't just an actual warmongerer like his brother tells him he is in episode 5.
Carnival Barker for all the wars we really didn't need.
He's actively trying to stoke division with his news broadcast because it makes him more money. There's a few more war-related messages we need to get to, like Star Wars. Believe it or not, there's a bunch of Star Wars references in Succession's first season.
Morning. Here to help fix the Death Star. Always here if you need a friendly ear, Lord Vader.
Shake that fucking tree, C-3PO. We're not the Gang of Four, we're the fucking Rebel Alliance.
How are you finding it outside the evil empire?
Who's that young Han Solo, and how do I get his dick in my ass?
What's interesting is at the end of episode 3, We get a scene between Kendall and Logan, who's watching TV in the middle of his room. It reminded me a lot of the scene in Return of the Jedi, where Vader meets with Emperor Palpatine before going to Endor. Palpatine, like Logan, is facing away from Vader, hiding his face, and Vader, like Kendall, must walk up to greet him. And like Palpatine has his window on the Death Star to look out at all that is his, Logan sits and watches his own television station, looking at all that is his, too. Past the obvious meaning of Waystar Royco being like the evil empire, Star Wars, at its core, is a father-son story. It's about how the son of a fallen Jedi eventually brings him back to the light, redeeming him in the process. What's sad about the show is that Logan's more like Palpatine than Vader, and Kendall's more like Darth Vader than Luke Skywalker. And we all know how that relationship ended. Star Wars, with all its talk of rebellions and evil empires, is the perfect motif for a show like Succession. Napoleon. You might have caught that Connor Roy is a huge Napoleon fan.
Being on the verge of setting up a podcast on Napoleonic history with a considerable level of investment interest, that's nothing?
I have tasted command and I cannot give it up. A certain artillery cadet by the name of N. Bonaparte.
What's cool is that one episode of Succession is called Austerlitz, which is the name Connor gave his ranch.
Welcome to Austerlitz.
Thank you.
In fact, Austerlitz was the location of one of Napoleon's greatest victories. The Battle of Austerlitz is often cited as a tactical masterpiece and is also known as the Battle of the Three Emperors, again with empires. I don't know much about Napoleon, but I do find it interesting that Succession's creators keep referencing emperors and empires throughout Season 1. Let's dive deeper on that. Empires. Kendall has one of the most ridiculous lines in Season 1.
You're fucking Imperial right now.
As if the creators are winking at us, we hear this same phrase later on in Episode 7 as the photographer takes pictures of Logan and Roman.
Yeah? Let's look Imperial here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Did you say Imperial?
Imperial.
What the hell does that mean?
This is certainly a concerted effort by the writers to add many references to empires, specifically ancient Rome. For instance, Roman's name. At one point, his father calls him Romulus, which is the name of the legendary founder and first king of Rome.
You better be smelling your fucking armpit, Romulus.
Apparently, most historians do not believe he existed in reality. There's a couple ancient folklore tales connected to Romulus, like the one where a she-wolf found him and his brother and allowed them to suckle on its breast. Cool. This is interesting because Kendall says in Episode 3,
Because, what are we if not storytellers?
Logan Roy and Waystar Royco have the power to create their own reality. And we get examples of this throughout the show, like when Logan plants stories about Kendall being back on drugs and everybody believes it.
Okay, I'm not on drugs. I'm not touching drugs. I don't use drugs anymore. I'm not on drugs. I'm not on fucking drugs.
Oh, hey, Dad. Dad, I like those stories you planted about me. That was...
Or how Logan's able to make Kendall's murder go away. It's obvious, but with power and the news specifically, you can control the stories that are circulated around the world. You can control the very truth as we know it. And it's interesting that Roman is named after a character in Roman mythology that probably didn't even exist. It was made up, just like many of Etienne's stories. There's another interesting reference to Rome. This picture in Caroline's house, depicting a bunch of common folk bowing to Roman soldiers. It's shown once when the kids meet on Shiv's wedding night, and once when Logan and Kendall reconcile. The painting, for me, reflects the fact that Kendall's submitting to his father's wishes, like the common folk submit to the Roman soldiers in front of them in the painting. Logan also talks about Indonesia in Episode 5, and how he wants to get in front of that market.
Do you know how many fucking people are in Indonesia?
In Episode 1, at Lawrence and Kendall's first meeting, a world map is shown in the background, with each country represented by their currency. Logan's media empire is more than just a conglomeration of businesses. It's an empire with plans to take over every part of the globe, and whoever owns the media in a given country holds most of the power in that country. It's like a new age empire that doesn't gather power by moving troops, but by buying news stations and controlling what people read, watch, and listen to. But we all know that the Roman Empire eventually fell. Corruption, the division of the empire, and invasion by Germanic tribes were the three main causes. Will Waystar Royko eventually fall like Rome? There's certainly a lot of infighting and attempts at invasion happening. I guess only time will tell. Theater. Theater is the second most prominent motif in Succession's first season. Remember what Willa does? Well, besides that, yes, she's a playwright. I didn't think much of this until I woke up to all the other theater references stuffed into this season, like when Roman and Shiv talk in a big classroom at the hospital in episode 2, and she asks him,
"You gonna do a play?"
It's funny that big classroom kinda looks like a theater, doesn't it? Of all the places for them to have a conversation, why did the creators choose a big auditorium? And what's the name of episode 2? Shit Show at the Fuck Factory. Shit Show. In episode 5, Roman gets butthurt that a production he didn't like got so popular. It's called The Biggest Turkey in the World. In episode 3, Kendall tells his assistant that it'd be nice to air an old story, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, because what are we if not for storytellers? And in episode 8, Shiv, while at dinner with Logan, asks him,
How was the play?
Oh, people pretending to be people.
Plays and theaters are a perfect motif for Succession because at the end of the day, all these people are just playing parts. They're acting. Kendall acts like a tough guy who can actually be a CEO. Logan acts like he loves his children. Jerry and Frank act like they support Kendall or Logan depending on which way the wind blows. Like Ewan says in episode 5.
You're all liars.
It's also fitting because, like we already discussed, Logan controls the stories of the entire planet, many of which are as fake as your favorite movie, play, or TV show. Fairy tales. There's a bunch of references to fairy tales in season 1, like Cinderella. Like in episode 2 when Marcia asks Greg to go get Logan's slippers from their house. When Greg returns with them, Tom tells him,
So, you got the slippers. Huh. I guess that makes you Prince Charming.
In episode 9, Shiv calls Jerry her fairy godmother.
You're very pushy, Missy.
Thank you, fairy godmother.
And later in that episode, Kendall says that his father will tell fairy tales after the hostile takeover.
He tells the world some, fairy tales.
Not to mention the part where Stewie tells Kendall,
Come on, man. You're not a little prince anymore.
In the Thanksgiving episode, Kendall asks Frank about loyalty.
Ever hear of loyalty?
Sure, wasn't he one of the 7 dwarfs?
Oh boy.
No?
Okay, we get it. Lots of fairy tale stuff happening here, Tom. But what does it mean? Let's start with Cinderella and her slippers. Shoes. In episode 3, Tom chastises Greg for wearing boat shoes at the office and asks him if they're speaking on the poop deck of a majestic schooner.
No? Then why the fuck are you wearing a pair of deck shoes, man?
Oh. Later, we see Greg walking by a lake in Central Park with new shoes in tow. And in episode 8, Kendall puts on a pair of designer shoes before his meeting with the Dust People. And what does he do during the meeting? He admits he bought the shoes like 5 minutes ago to impress them and takes them off. I think shoes and Cinderella slipper references point to Kendall most of all. This dude tries his darndest to fit into the slippers of being CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, and yet no matter what he does, he simply can't. I also think that fairy tales are a great metaphor for what happens in Succession. From the outside, and certainly on the surface, it seems like the Roys are a pretty close family. At least, that's what Logan is so good at acting like at parties and his daughter's wedding. There's nothing more important than family, he says. Everything I've done for my children, he says. Yeah, bullshit. Fairy tales are just that, tales. They're not the real world, and it's a perfect metaphor for the fake world that Logan suspended his children inside of. A world they've grown accustomed to living in a world so hard to break out of. Willy Wonka. I think there's one key Willy Wonka reference in Succession's first season. The title of episode 2 is Shit Show at the Fuck Factory. Fuck Factory as in chocolate factory, maybe? I know this sounds ridiculous, but consider Willy Wonka's story. It's about a bunch of kids who get invited to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. Most of them are spoiled rotten, except for Charlie, obviously. Throughout the tour, each of the kids have more than Charlie, but act out in ways that are selfish, rude, and condescending. Many believe that if you have wealth, you can buy your way into shortcuts, but it's always better to do the right thing instead. Sound familiar? Not only that, but Willy Wonka has the important message that children learn bad behaviors from their parents. Augustus has a bad habit of eating, as do his parents, and Violet has a desire to be number one in all she does, something she learned from her parents as well. Like Logan says in the final episode,
I blame myself. I spoiled you. And now, you're fucked.
Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is another fairy tale-like story with a sparkling facade that covers up some pretty dark truths about human nature. It's perfect for Succession. Oedipus and Hamlet. Speaking of plays and theater, there's a few references to Hamlet and Oedipus in Season 1 too. While Roman is at dinner with Lawrence in Episode 6, Lawrence says,
You and Kendall are thinking of killing your dad? That's a little Greek tragedy.
Yeah, Oedipus.
Later in Episode 7, Marcia tells Shiv how Logan had to hear about her meeting with Gil through the grapevine.
And he has to hear it from his so-called friends on the phone, dripping poison in his ear.
Like Hamlet. It's just interesting, seeing how these stories both center around family, betrayal, and father-son relationships. It's easy to see why it's applicable to Succession. Games. Logan is a big fan of games.
Marcia. She's got her own game going on.
What does that mean?
You know what it means. You've got your game going on. I've got my game.
What's your game?
Everybody's got a game.
He says this ironically while watching a game on TV. I was shocked at how many games are referenced in Season 1, whether it's tennis in the intro, Logan's birthday baseball game, the I went to market game, or the billiard table Shiv and Jerry talk over in Episode 9. Then we have spoken references like,
What you kids do not understand, it's all part of the game. You're scared to compete. What about it, son? You want to jump out the trenches and play a game of soccer? Maybe you should write a book or collect sports cars or something.
You lose. You lose.
The whole of Succession is a game. Everybody is playing with their eyes on the prize, control of Waystar Royco. I can't help but think that Logan might just be playing one big fancy game with his family as well. He's probably testing all of them as part of the game, seeing if they can measure up to what they'll face as CEO of this huge empire. He might feign disappointment or anger, but deep down inside, he might just be testing his kids. For Logan, there is no difference between the game and his personal life with family and friends. He's always playing the game. He never stops. I love how the creators included so many references to games in Season 1. Prostitution. Prostitution is a fun motif in Succession. Everybody loves making fun of the fact that Willa is a prostitute. Marcia grills Willa about being a prostitute in Episode 7.
I knew a woman in Paris. She did what you do. She was very intelligent.
But in reality, Logan is a bit of a prostitute as well. Kendall, in Episode 7, tells everyone that
You don't have a business strategy, Dad. Your whole business model is based on seducing presidents. You're a really high-class hooker.
But isn't Logan seducing the general public too with his news? He tells Gil in Episode 9,
Well, I didn't make human nature, but I do know what they read and what they watch. I make my nut off what people really want. Don't tell me about people. I go flat broke in a week if I didn't.
Logan seduces the public with news and stories they can't resist. He gives them what they really want. And he seduces presidents with the promise of more power, something he can inevitably give them, as evidenced by Gil making a pact with Logan after trashing him in his campaign. Time. In Episode 1, Tom gives Logan a watch for his birthday. Apparently it's high-end, but Logan doesn't seem to care. Can you guess why? Because Logan is at the end of his life. Episode 1 literally takes place on his birthday, a time for remembering how long you've been on planet Earth. He's on death's door, whether he likes it or not, and the gift is just another reminder of something he can't buy: immortality. In episode 5, when the Roys play the I went to market game, Logan stumbles on remembering what everybody said before. Roman teases him, saying,
Alright, come on, dude. What's it gonna be? Is it a hot dog or China? Immortality, the soul of the nation?
What?
The clock's ticking, time's running out.
At one point in episode 9, Stewie hears Kendall talk to Frank and says,
"You on me? You talked to the fucking grandfather clock? Has he signed anything?"
All through this season, we get hints that time stops for no one and will march on despite what anybody says.
Time's up. Time's up for the big media operations.
And this leads right into another shining motif of Succession, Season 1, Dinosaurs. Logan is part of the old guard, a man stuck in the past who thinks that people are still watching TV. Kendall is part of the new guard, a man who sees the future for what it is, one that's steamrolling towards a more digital world. The show makes numerous references to this old world versus new world philosophy, some of which we've already talked about. For instance, Logan's war medals and artifacts from ancient Rome. Yes, these also point to the fact that Waystar Royco is a media empire. But in the context of Logan Roy himself, it makes him look old and outdated. Logan's elevator is a little old as well, isn't it? Elevators are a big motif in this show, and Logan's elevator is old-fashioned compared to the modern elevators in Waystar Royco. Dinosaurs are referenced a lot in Succession Season 1 as well. In Episode 1, for instance, Lawrence says that,
"I'm not letting you Neanderthals in to raid my company. Ever."
I'm sorry?
A bunch of bloated dinosaurs who didn't even notice a monkey swinging by till yesterday. Well, fuck you, daddy's boy.
In Episode 4, Kendall says,
The dinosaurs having one last roar at the meteor before it wipes them out.
In Episode 10, Stewie calls Logan a brontosaurus.
Bro, he is a fucking brontosaurus.
Logan and company are big, bloated dinosaurs who've gotten big and fat from dominating the media landscape. It's been a violent, ruthless environment for Logan, and he's won by being just as unforgiving as the Mesozoic period. And what's crazy is he showcases numerous scars on his back for undisclosed reasons. You'd think that a dinosaur, after fighting all their life with other predators, would have a few scars here and there to show that experience. But something is coming. The meteor is burning up in the atmosphere as Logan and company scramble to buy more local TV stations. The world is about to change, and that's something that will spell doom for the empire of Waystar Royco unless they shift focus. Dogs. There's an alarming amount of dog references in Succession Season 1, like when Greg dresses up in a dog costume in Episode 1, or how Greg steals cookies and puts them in a dog poop bag in Episode 3, or how Connor brought a dog with cancer into his local bar, asking people to give it a good life.
Heard you killed my brother's dog.
What about the dog pound game Roman and Kendall used to play with each other, referenced in Episode 8?
He used to lock me in a cage.
What the fuck?
No, that's a true story. Oh wait, you're pretending that you don't remember the dog pound.
Also, remember how Roman wants Greg to get him one of Dad's sweaters while he's at home? He wants one that specifically smells like Dad. Dogs are known to steal things like socks that have the fragrance of their owners and lay with them when they're gone. It's said that it calms them down. Then we have a bunch of spoken dog references.
I'm not gonna give you a blowjob when your dog dies. I want you to call off your dogs.
Stewie will follow the money like a dog in a cartoon.
Can't keep a good dog down, right, Ken?
I think the dog motif here has two meanings. For one, the characters in this show are like a bunch of dogs wanting to obey their master. At one point, Tom says he's going to comply to the prenuptial.
I hereby comply.
I don't want you to comply. That is not the basis for a healthy relationship.
Fine.
Roman, when it comes down to it, could not disobey and betray his father in Episode 6. There's clear levels of control and hierarchy in the Roy family, as evidenced in Episode 2, when they tell Willa to leave the room every 5 seconds as they discuss important family business. And she obeys, obviously, like a dog. The whole of Succession is a bunch of characters either falling in line or acting like they're falling in line to appease their master, Logan himself. I think it also gets back to Logan's news stations. The general public are like a bunch of dogs lapping up everything their master gives them. We're obedient to the messages we hear and see and watch. And further, we want to be obedient. We want to be commanded. We don't want to think for ourselves. We want to be told what to do, like a dog. Elevators. Trust me when I say there's a mountain of scenes that take place in elevators this season. I'm not going to mention them all. I'll just play them for you over top my voice right now. As we now know, this show is obsessed with power and hierarchies. I saw the elevators as a metaphor for characters vying for more power. It's interesting that Kendall's house is on the ground level of New York City, and after his father calls him a fucking idiot in episode 3, he takes the elevator down to the street, and the episode ends on a close-up of his face as he processes what just happened. This is echoed again in episode 6 as he gets stuck in traffic, on the street, and can't make his way up to the board meeting where the people of power are discussing the fate of Waystar Royko. Kendall gets stuck waiting for the elevator on the way up, in fact, and frantically tries to make it there on time. This episode, when used as a metaphor for Kendall trying to gain more power, is fantastic because he's denied altitude from the moment his helicopter can't take off from Manhattan. He's stuck on the ground, and his attempt to take control of Waystar Royko fails because of it. Consequently, Logan's house is about as high as you can get in New York City, right? There's a couple scenes in season 1 where characters have conversations on balconies or rooftops, namely in episode 2 when Jerry informs Kendall of Waystar Royko's massive debt, or in episode 5 when Tom and Greg discuss how he needs to go into the office and shred some documents. The fact these conversations happened on rooftops was interesting to me. Like the deepest, darkest secrets of this empire were only disclosed from the highest of places, where complete and total secrecy are guaranteed. And in Logan's place, he has a huge spiral staircase that takes him down to his bedroom, like Mount Olympus, which is also referenced in episode 9.
I see, so how about you come down off of Mount Olympus and propose to a mere mortal?
And what about at Shiv's wedding? Logan and Marcia's room is at the top of the enormous staircase, while Kendall's room is at the base level of the grounds. Interesting stuff. For me, the creators are definitely using height and elevators to their advantage to tell a deeper story. Eggs. In the final 2 episodes of season 1, there's a bunch of references to eggs, like when Caroline tells Greg his nickname was Greg the Egg.
You're Greg Egg.
Excuse me?
You're Greg the Egg. When you were born, you looked like a little misshapen egg.
Here's a couple other spoken references to eggs.
Has the chicken laid the egg?
I'm not fucking hen to lay you eggs. I'm a strategist.
You can't make an omelet without breaking some dicks.
Greg the motherfucking egg.
How's the scrambled egg? Is it congealed?
What's that?
How's that scrambled egg? It's been sitting there for like an hour.
What does it mean? I think we need to go back to episode 6 to get the answer. At a dinner with Greg, Tom says about life in the city.
Yeah, sure. I was an outsider once. A young guy from St. Paul, alone in the big city, and it was hard. And you create this kind of protective shell, but underneath, we're all just little nudie turtles.
In episode 10, he says something similar to Shiv.
I know that you're hard and you're tough, but I just want to get in. I want in on you.
I think this is a fascinating way of viewing all the characters in this show. Tom's right. They're all tough on the outside, but inside they're nudie turtles. Inside, all they want is love. It's both funny and heartbreaking that Connor calls love a virus.
I don't know how to say this, except to say that love is a strange and peculiar affliction. It's like a virus.
And quite literally pays someone to love him. It's heartbreaking that Kendall, at the end of the day, wants the love and blessings of his father. It's heartbreaking that on her wedding night, Shiv finally admits how scared she is of true, real, honest love before breaking down in front of Tom and kissing him. They are all tough on the outside, like an egg, but if you crack through that shell, you'll find that soft interior. Boats. The amount of boat references in succession is insane. Episode 3 of season 1 is called Lifeboats because of the speech Kendall gives the company about bringing him 1,000 lifeboats. Later in that episode, Kendall says,
"Because steady as she goes hits the iceberg."
Remember when Tom catches Greg putting cookies in a dog poop bag? He spots his shoes and says,
"Forgive me, but we talking to each other on the poop deck of a majestic schooner?"
There's a variety of boat references in other episodes too. like in episode 6 when Logan says,
I had some
I'm in the middle of turning a fucking tanker!
and in episode 2, Roman tells Jerry,
Just wanted to say thanks for captaining us through this shitstorm.
And where do the three siblings meet before Shiv's wedding? In a little rowboat on the water. So we've proven our point, boats are everywhere in Succession. Before we get into what it all means, let me introduce one other theme of the show that ties into this. Water. One of the best scenes in season 1 is when Logan swims in Connor's pool. He gets out and you see his back laced with scars. The secret to this scene is something Shiv says earlier in episode 7.
Let's go for a swim. Everybody, get your dad out there.
Dad can't swim.
Yeah, he doesn't even trust water.
Yet minutes later we see him swimming laps like a champ. This is a funny contrast to when their psychologist dives into the pool and breaks all his front teeth. In episode 8, Logan tells Greg,
I don't want him showing up dead at the bottom of some French fag's pool.
And what does Connor say about himself earlier this season?
I'm water, I flow.
There's a couple other spoken references too.
Sharks are circling.
He said I was dead in the water without him and tried to finger bang me.
Let's analyze this through the lens of Logan swimming in his pool. Maybe Logan isn't the person steering the boat in the first place. Maybe he's the shark in the water, or even something like a whale. This puts his scars in a new light. The details of the scars themselves aren't important. What's important are the visual messages here. He's an old whale who many have tried to kill, but they've been unsuccessful. He has the scars to prove it, and he's still swimming. In episode 9, Gil says,
He's just weighty, Shiv. He carries his gravity. He's not a man, he's a fucking planet.
Logan is an apex predator. He's a big fat whale in the ocean swimming wherever he damn well pleases. While Kendall speaks of lifeboats and the Titanic and staying out of the ocean, Logan basically is the ocean itself. He's a different breed, and that's what I think these motifs at their core are pointing to. Tables. The main thing I want to discuss in terms of tables in Succession is the dichotomy between Logan's big dining room table and the many long tables the characters meet at inside the offices of Waystar Royco. They look a lot alike, don't they? This possibly shows that for the Roy siblings, there's no boundary between work and family. They are mixed up like liquids in a cocktail, unfortunately. Episode 2 is heartbreaking because all it is a bunch of scenes where the siblings fight and vie for power when it should be a somber moment where they comfort each other. They can't even tend to something as serious as their dad having a brain hemorrhage without worrying about what it means for the future of their family business. In episode 7, they go to Austerlitz for therapy, but in reality, it's just a publicity stunt, which shocks the Roy siblings. And Logan only goes to his daughter's wedding because the optics would be horrible if he didn't. Logan only saves Kendall in episode 10, I think, because it would reflect bad on the family name if he was ever implicated in a murder. Logan does not care about his family. He only cares about what benefits being a loving father can give him in the media. For Logan, there is no border between family and business. A perfect encapsulation of this is when he takes candid photos with Roman at Austerlitz, and he immediately starts talking to Roman about the satellite launch. Not life, not how he's doing, not how his family is doing, the satellite. Long dining room and boardroom tables, for me, are the perfect way to showcase this idea. The Carnival. Our final motif is one of my favorites, the Carnival. Besides the fact that Waystar Royco has theme parks and that Greg worked as a dog at one of them, there's a couple of Carnival references we get in season 1. For instance,
Carnival Barker for all the wars we really didn't need.
In episode 7, Logan tells everyone,
What you kids do not understand, it's all part of the game.
Oh, it's all part of the game.
Come on, everybody. It's a rootin' tootin' super fucking fun game for all the family. Step right up!
There's not a ton of Carnival references, but I love how it relates to some of the other motifs in season 1, like games. Carnivals are full of games where you can compete with your family and against strangers. All the games are rigged in favor of the carnival, of course, designed to maximize profit for the organizers. There's also tons of unbelievable spectacles and shows, all of which are fake as well. Most everything at a carnival, at its core, is fake. Past the glowy, colorful facade, nothing is actually real. It's like a fairy tale world people get to escape into for a while. And isn't that what the news is most times? It's a fairy tale designed to get people to believe they're living in more interesting times than they actually are. Designed to separate people, make it about us versus them, and bring out the worst in all of us, to make us more like animals. In many ways, it's designed to keep us in obedience like a dog, to keep us beneath the masters above us who give us our daily food to eat and tell us what to do and how to think. Many of the motifs I mentioned in this video, dogs, war, fairy tales, games, in some way or another, build to this central idea. We are waging war with strangers, obedient to our masters, living in a fairy tale, and constantly competing with everybody because of the garbage media we consume every single day. Like the final shot of episode 1, these ideas are in every home, influencing the masses, changing the world, and creating a new reality that's quite honestly terrifying. Thanks y'all for watching this video. If you want a video on season 2, 3, or 4, please let me know down in the comments. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. If you want, sign up for my Substack newsletter as well. It's free to do so. You get all the written versions of these breakdowns there. The link to do that is in the description. Thanks y'all so much for watching. I'd love to hear from you down below about what you thought of my breakdown. See you next time.